Hello and welcome everyone to Women's Health Tech Wednesdays. I am your host, Nina Joshi. Have a couple of quick announcements before we bring on our guest for today. We also have our Breakthrough Alliance Challenge. Those are going to be open as well. Applications are open until the end of October, so make sure that you join that. And we also have our Women's Health Tech Challenge. Applications are open until the beginning of September, so we do have some additional time for those to be a part of the Women's Health Tech Challenge, also going to be another incredible event. And with that, we'd like to formally introduce our guest for today, Nuzi Barkatally, who is the VP of Startup Banking and Healthcare at SVB. As you know, we love questions here at Women's Health Tech Wednesdays. So if you have any for Nuzi, please use the Q&A feature or the chat, and I will make sure that we get to it. So with that, I would like to formally bring you on. Thank you so much for being here today, Nuzi.
Thanks for having me.
I am so excited to kind of dive in and learn a little bit more, not only about your career, but also about yourself. So I think a great place to start is if you could just tell us a little bit more about your background and really the journey that has led you to SVB.
Yeah, it's kind of a long and windy journey to get here.
Our favorite ones.
I kind of joke I've had like kind of different careers in one lifetime to kind of bring me to where I'm at today. But I started my career working on the design and UX side of things. Worked at some advertising companies, went to some startups. And basically when I started working at a startup was when I realized like I love this. I love the ecosystem. I love like what we're doing here. And had kind of various roles in terms of like product development, customer research, that kind of stuff. While I was at those startups, I started mentoring through Techstars, and mentored a bunch of other founders, and just was really passionate about healthcare, started working more with healthcare startups, went to go do a master's of research in healthcare and design in London, came
Wow.
back, worked at another children's mental health startup, and then I got recruited to SVB. And my role was to basically support founders that are working in the healthcare space. And I just felt like I was like, I don't have any banking experience, but they were like, you would be perfect. So come on board. And I've been at SVB for about 2 years now.
Wow, that's incredible. And I would just only imagine that your kind of entry point, your journey really starting in kind of like the research in the UX space and the design space has probably given you such an interesting lens on kind of healthcare and like startup culture even now.
Yeah, for sure. I think I'm also a patient. I'm a chronic illness patient. And so I
Mm,
think that's kind of what drives a lot of like my passion for healthcare. I was diagnosed with Crohn's disease at 18.
mm,
And I think being a designer and being a patient, you definitely view things in a different way. Like you see all the areas of, technology and systems and process that could be better. I think like having, an early career in design has definitely influenced the lens in which I view the world, the lens in which I view systems and healthcare and all of that.
that's amazing. And you're so right too about sometimes, being the end user yourself really
Oh,
does give you like that necessary lived experience to really understand like if we're designing for something and I am that something that we're designing for, like how can I marry those two together?
yeah. And how can we make these experiences better for patients? So, yeah.
100%. I mean, I'm sure that there are so many that you can choose from, but I would love if you could share because, you've had such a wealth of different types of experiences. What have been kind of some of the more like rewarding aspects of your career just in the healthcare sector so far?
I mean, I think what I do now is just like incredibly rewarding to like support founders that are building within healthcare. Like it is my biggest passion and I feel like it's the biggest way I can have the most impact is
Mhm.
supporting founders that are doing this. Especially female founders, especially founders that are been building in the women's health space. I think I just feel like it's I can see the effect. I can see these companies grow. I can see, and then I think also I, being and having that experience as an operator has also been rewarding. And I have I'm able to kind of share that as kind of advice or things to look out for when I talk to founders. But one of the startups that I worked with was a children's mental health startup. And so I think that space is very challenging. And, again, another area where you can kind of see direct benefits on like how this is helping either families, parents, kids, that kind of stuff. So.
No, 100%. And I think kind of having those dual perspectives is always so helpful. And I'm so curious too, because I think you're speaking about, kind of your role as an operator and how that's kind of really been able to like give you this perspective. Are there any kind of skills or traits that you kind of believe have been most critical, I would say, to your success, or kind of just thinking broadly too, when we think about like leadership success within this space? Or is there anything that kind of comes to mind?
I mean, I feel like I have a lot of deep empathy for, I think like just having been a patient, I have a lot of deep empathy for, and like being an operator too, like having empathy for the founders that are building these startups, um, for the patients that they're building for, the clinicians that they're building for. I would say that having a background in UX and user research, customer research, like being able to be curious and self-aware and like understand, I mean, it goes back to empathy in some ways, but like
Totally.
understanding what their needs are, what their goals are. I feel like that's what's driven a lot of what my career has turned into. And I think the last piece would be just like authenticity. And sometimes that comes with age too, but
Mhm.
uh, just being true to myself and like being able to relate to founders one-on-one, apart from like, being at SVB and all that kind of stuff. So
100%. I love that. I think even just being in the capacity where you are able to like now kind of be behind the scenes and really help like the portfolio companies, do what they need to do to like drive all of these meaningful impacts. I can only imagine is like in and of itself so rewarding.
yeah, yeah, completely.
That's amazing. I have so many questions I want to ask you, I think really around, your role, the work that you do, all of that. But I kind of first want to get into a little bit around just what you're seeing in the current landscape, kind of as a leader in this space. I don't know if there's any folks on the call right now that are kind of, founders or raising or kind of at, at that these various inflection points that you are kind of within a startup. Kind of wanted to ask you, get your thoughts on what are you kind of seeing in terms of challenges or opportunities in the landscape, specifically kind of affecting women's health startups, kind of in the general funding arena?
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot that I could say about that. Obviously, like women's health hasn't had as much funding, although it's the highest it's been, but that just speaks to just where it was, 5, 10 years ago. It's definitely increased at the highest rate just because it was at, very low numbers and is at kind of like an okay amount now.
Definitely.
Um, I think when I look at like a larger landscape, and this is probably pertains to just like all healthcare startups in some ways, is that um, there's a lot of different like point solutions. And I think
Mm,
payers and systems are kind of having a hard time figuring out, well, like what's something that can connect all of this, or how do we choose, how do we differentiate from all of these things? I think it's definitely much more competitive to have to sell into payers, health systems, providers, sell into employers. Like I think previously it was easier to do that, and now, there's so many options. So I think that only is not only on like women's health, but across healthcare. For women's health, I think, the biggest thing has been proving through that there's such a huge need and need for more clinical research, need for more like funding, investment funding, like VC funding. And I think some of the argument that I hear is that there's not enough proof points, to say
mm,
that there, but we all know, there is, we're 50% of the population.
right.
This one investor, Nassim Sayani from Emily Ventures, says this, that, we might be, 50% of the population, but we are birthing 100% of the future. And I just love that because it is so critical that we get women's health right. And in terms of like all encompassing, not just fertility, not just, certain areas, we're more likely to be diagnosed with migraines. We're more likely to be diagnosed with anxiety and depression and chronic illness, autoimmune, and it takes longer for the diagnosis. Like there's
Mhm.
such a huge need. There's such a huge need that, of course, it would be like an amazing opportunity to invest in. But I think the biggest challenge is like what we're fighting against in terms of like perception.
100%. I think that was really like insightful. And I think that's you painted a really good picture of I think the challenges, but also like the path forward too, which I think is really
Yeah, yeah.
because I think there definitely is a big path forward. And I think on that note, for any founders that are, maybe going through a raise right now or really starting to think about raising kind of in the near future, it's exciting because you not only have the perspective now, but also kind of as an operator too on in like the startup environment. Are there any kind of nuggets of wisdom or pieces of advice that you have for founders today?
Oh man. It's like I think like any founder, you have to just really believe in what you're building.
Mhm.
And it's like you like kind of similar to building a product, you just have to find the right customers or the right investors that believe in you. And so I think, yes, there's a lot of no's to have to get to one yes. But if you really believe in what you're building, like if you really can envision a future or, they always say like if you can't stop thinking like a future without this, like that's kind of the area where you want to make sure it exists in the world.
I love
But it's not easy. It's not easy building a company, and it's absolutely not easy building a healthcare company and, being a female founder and building in women's health even. So it's like having that source of truth. And maybe that means having a community like
Mhm.
this, having a network, having a crew of people who can kind of like, pick you up after kind of all of the things that you're coming across as you're going on your journey. But the biggest advice is like, knowing deep down what you're meant to be doing in this world and go after it.
I love that. And that's like very just inspiring. I think for all of us, founders or not, I definitely think that's really
Yeah, it
I
applies to all of us. Like, we all want to
100%.
make an impact. So,
No, I really love that. And I think really just curious too, because not only as an operator, but now as kind of a leader and being in all of these spaces, I feel like whenever we kind of talk about healthcare, we're always kind of talking about it in like our career. But I
mm,
would also imagine like our own like personal relationship with our own health and how important that is, especially as we, climb up the corporate ladder as we're, taking on these really amazing, impactful, but challenging new roles is probably also
mhm,
so important. So
mhm.
would love to just like pick your brain a little bit more about that. Like, how has your work in just healthcare influenced your own like personal approach to your health and well-being? Like, is that something that you've kind of
Mm.
noticed a relationship or correlation at all?
Well, it's a very interesting question. I've like always had people ask me like how has being a patient affected like, how you envision healthcare or your work, but
Yeah.
I have never thought about how like my work impacts um how I am as a patient in some ways. I will say that I am always I'm always trying stuff.
Mhm.
I'm always like, oh, there's this, one app that can help me track this, or, there's this other thing, this one company that is like helping with this coaching stuff. Like I'm willing to
I
try
love that.
more and
Mhm.
like give some of these companies a chance because I mean, I'm probably like an early adopter on some of this stuff because I know the possibility. And while maybe some of these companies or like, products are not fully where they need to be, but I think I can see that there's benefit to them existing in the world. Um, and I think I mean, I think I'm always coming up with ideas too, as like, as like somebody who's like, I'm like, oh, this would be a great idea because I can understand the landscape. I can understand, maybe the opportunities on kind of
Mhm.
the funding side, and then I can also see the need on the patient side. So
So you're just
yeah,
kind of like being a connector in all of these different
yeah,
ways.
yeah. So then like when I come across founders that are building in these spaces, or
Mhm.
I can be like, yes, like I think this needs to absolutely exist, and it would benefit somebody like me too. So
Totally.
yeah,
I
I
love
think
that.
just
That's
being
so
open.
funny. Yeah, I think that's so cool to kind of like be able to see that relationship. And I think for you, kind of as a leader, do you have any kind of, once again, I'm tapping you in for words of wisdom or for advice, but do you have any kind of advice for, maybe younger folks or folks that are kind of entering into the healthcare field when you kind of think about like not only the things you need to do to like succeed in the field, but also kind of that work-life balance and like prioritizing your own health and well-being as
Mm.
you kind of take on these types of roles.
Yeah, it's definitely not easy. Like I think even in this role, it's been a challenge to kind of balance like with my personal life, with my health, all of those things. And I definitely have to put like boundaries in terms of like, okay, I just don't have the energy to do all of this. So how can I kind of prioritize? Um, but I think like working with really great people helps. And I think I work with really amazing people at SVB. And I think that's made all of the difference. So like if you're starting out earlier in your career, I would say whoever you're reporting to, your mentor, your manager, like that's key. That person has to be somebody that can help guide you, help teach you, like is willing to kind of actually mentor you.
Totally.
I think that's huge. Like having a really early great manager, a mentor in your career is so important. Working with really amazing people, finding, the areas that you can get excited about, get curious about within healthcare. And of course, if you have your own personal or lived experience, like bring that to the table because that's what makes you unique and and your own perspective in coming into healthcare.
I love that. I think that's so valuable about like really kind of centering around like that focus and that intention. That's
Hmm.
amazing.
Hmm.
I wanted to ask, I mean, because you are really seeing so much right now kind of in this space, I'm just so curious, like what are there any kind of major barriers or challenges that kind of you're seeing as you are kind of sitting in this role where you really get to look at kind of a landscape view of healthcare, specifically kind of in the startup space? Are there kind of like on just like an ecosystem level, are there kind of any interesting like challenges or barriers that you're seeing that a lot of founders are kind of having to navigate kind of in the year of 2024 with this?
Yeah, well, obviously it's not an easy funding year. I think
Mm,
coming across VC funding is a little bit more challenging, but still it's higher than what it was pre-pandemic. So, we're still doing okay. It's just not at the levels of like 2021.
totally.
Um, and I think maybe, we've had a lot more founders come into the healthcare space. Like, I
Mm,
think, it's definitely, I remember when I was like mentoring startups with Techstars in like early 2015, and healthcare startups weren't the like fun, exciting, like trendy space. It was like all these other areas, but
totally.
I think that's definitely changed now. And I think that makes the landscape a little bit harder. Like there's a lot of really great companies now that we have compared to 2015, and like, to kind of fit where you can build something that's like really meaningful and that can have impact that um doing that in healthcare actually is very hard. Like something that's meaningful that can have impact in healthcare is hard just because of the way the incentives are. It's not
Mm,
aligned to kind of always have it's more aligned to cut cost or increase uh increase funding,
right.
increase more money going to a certain area. But um I think when you're building in healthcare, I always think like if you're building within the way the system is right now, you could do another like make money. You could, do a revenue cycle management company. You could figure that out. But I think if you have like a mission in healthcare, I think you have to hold on to that mission. And sometimes you might have to like navigate like
Mhm.
sideways and zigzag, and maybe you come back to that mission eventually once you've, gotten creative with the business model, or, you
Right.
know, navigated the customers that you're going after. Um, but it's easy to lose sight of that. Like it's easy to just kind of figure out where's the area where you can make the most money. And I think we really need more founders that are building in healthcare that really want to see how we can increase more empowerment for patients, increase more access, equitable access to patients. So, yeah, that was a
I
long-winded answer, but
No, I love that. And I think that's so true. I think speaking to like the need for the broader mission, especially kind of thinking beyond just like not only within an existing framework, but if we want to like create something that's new and innovating that kind of is moving healthcare forward, I
yes.
think that makes a lot of sense.
Yes, yeah, yeah. It takes time, and
Mhm.
healthcare, it is the way it is for a reason. So, yeah.
Definitely. I love that. I'm also so curious too, because right, you hear a lot about how kind of what's happened since the pandemic and in terms of like, virtual adoption, like all of these kind of new behaviors. And I'm so curious because you have done this kind of in the past where you really were like the voice of the consumer, the voice of the patient, and kind of thinking back to maybe like Techstars, in 2015 to now, like has there been any big change in like patient expectations or like what
Hmm.
patients are looking for in healthcare, or has it been pretty consistent?
Hmm. I mean, I definitely think there's a change in patient expectation. We compare our healthcare to like all the other amazing apps that we use and that are like super easy to do whatever, to manage your finances, to, all sorts of things. And
Mhm.
healthcare is still like not always the best experience, yet we have an expectation to have a better experience because we see it out in the world. Like we know
Mhm.
a better experience exists. And that has just come with like technology and design and more interoperability or like systems and stuff like
Right.
that. But I think I think we have to be careful about how we also like think about those expectations or like assume what we know about certain patients. I think like telehealth has definitely allowed for more access to patients. However, maybe certain rural areas, it's still
Mhm.
hard, like you need like a primary care doctor's office that you can still go to, and maybe they have a Zoom set up there for a specialist, or like maybe it's like a grocery store or like a pharmacy or something else where they would probably still have to come in to then get access to Zoom and do telehealth. So like not
Totally.
telehealth has increased access but not always. And so yeah, I think just thinking about, yeah, we might have expectations of patients, and then they also have changing expectations of what they're experiencing as well.
Definitely. No, I like that. And I can definitely see how, as all of the tools and the things that we use become more and more sophisticated, we're kind of asking ourselves, why can't healthcare be more like this? And I can
Right.
100% personally relate. I think we all can. Want to make sure that we have some time for some audience questions. So I have one right now, which is thank you for the great discussion. To Nuzi's point about the market for point solutions getting crowded and attracting payers and providers. What are VCs like SVB doing to support creation of more ecosystems and merging solutions to have bigger impact?
Yeah. So I mean, we don't invest directly. We're a bank. We support founders. We kind of support the ecosystem. But what we're seeing from VCs are, they're wanting, there's still a lot of investors who are investing in really important like point solutions that kind of focus on whether it's, women's health or metabolic health or mental health. But I think for other BCs, they're probably wanting to focus on more like platform technologies, as they say, and like things that can maybe weave a thread between all of these point solutions. Because, and that's, like what I mentioned earlier, that's just because it is starting to be an overcrowded market with, selling into payers and health systems and employers and stuff. But I mean, a lot of what we do in terms of like supporting founders is like ecosystem, community events, talking to other founders, talking to other investors, hosting panel events, like doing stuff like this. So you can have those conversations to understand like where do we need to go in the future? Like what can we do to kind of, because a lot of these point solutions still need to exist. But what are the ways that we can kind of thread them together?
I love that. Awesome. Thank you. We have one more question from our audience, which is what are the challenges healthcare SaaS platforms face when underwriting risk? And then I don't know if you have any like stats relating to this.
Oh, interesting. Well, I'm not sure what exactly they mean in terms of underwriting risk.
Let's see if there is follow-up.
I mean, I think healthcare SaaS, it depends on maybe what you're referring to with the type of product that you're building. I would say that right now, even for like health systems and payers, like they're also inundated with all of these healthcare SaaS and AI. And, I'm starting to hear that they're feeling a little like they're not seeing the actual right away benefit of AI, So like, of course, it's not going to have an initial benefit, but for them as a health system, they want to see either like more money coming in or they want to see a cost reduction. And so like being able to kind of prove through if that's happening in a short amount of time, I think those are kind of inherent risks. And I will say that I think a lot of clinicians have all sorts of technology and like at the end of the day, all of this technology should be in support of the physician and patient or clinician and patient relationship, not like, not trying to be an AI doctor or not trying to like, we need to figure out how do we support and hold up that relationship. Like, how do we surround it with tech? How do we like increase that relationship strength? And so I would say that the biggest challenge with a lot of healthcare SaaS is they're not really thinking through the overall flow of or like overall process workflow, and so just focusing on the tech, it's losing sight of what the larger picture is.
Totally. I love that. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Nuzi. I realize we are at time, but if for anyone, if they have any additional questions, the recording is available and her LinkedIn is also in the chat if you want to connect with her. But I'm also so excited if you don't want to do any of those. The good news is that in October, we will actually be having her back with one of her SVB colleagues for another kind of great discussion, really diving into the work that they're doing with SVB and maybe being able to answer more of your guys' questions. So another really great opportunity to chat with Nuzi and her colleague. So make sure you join us next week for our next Women's Health Tech Wednesdays. Wanted to thank our sponsors for sponsoring this event, as well as to our guest for such an informative and inspiring conversation. Really appreciate you taking the time to chat with us, Nuzi, and we will see you all next week.
Thanks,
Bye, everyone.
everybody.